Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and hey, it's a big mod time as the Kraka Drak mod has finally released for Total War Warhammer 3. This means that a very popular mod from Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 has now made its third iteration, and it's a bit different to what we are normally used to. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm super excited about this. I've actually been playing for a while last night since it released. If you're used to the Dwarfs, well, this is kind of similar, but you're not going to be using a lot of the heavy firepower. In fact, a few things have changed, so let's just jump right in. We'll start off with the faction and lord effects for your new legendary lord. So faction effects are as follows: unsuitable climate, Chaos Wastelands. Chaos Wastelands in Norse can be reclaimed by local buildings. Hero capacity +2 for Thanes, corruption -1 faction wide, and melee attack +5 for lords and embedded heroes. Your lord effects are as follows: recruitment and upkeep costs -35% for Huskars for lord's army, attrition -25% casualties suffered from chaos undivided corruption and chaos waits attrition lord's army. Then you've got growth +5 for all provinces, always very useful, and finally wound recovery time -2. So they're pretty good bonuses all around, and you're going to start to notice the extra Thanes are going to be very useful as you start to expand. The more that you can get as extra damage, the better. Your new legendary lord will also have access to a bunch of custom skills, so you'll notice it's going to focus around, reducing the upkeep cost for Huskars, extra attack for lord's army. You're going to be able to get better charge bonuses, a lot of really good stuff. Near the end, there's also a really good bonus, which is focusing around extra weapon strength when fighting against Warriors of Chaos, Demons of Chaos, and Norska. That in itself is for all your armies, so it's actually going to be very beneficial to you. Got a bunch of custom items too, and a mount, which we'll talk about later because it's also a unit too. So you've got a lot to actually make this sword quite unique. And the bonuses for against the demons, I can't stress enough, it's going to be so useful to you because you're going to be dealing with a lot of enemies that are chaos related. So yeah, you want your armies as strong as possible. You can focus that line, the better. You've got the same building lines as the normal dwarfs, but you will realize that things will change a bit. Not only do you have some new buildings, which will focus around your actual faction itself, it's your own new mechanic, but you will lose access to your big artillery pieces, your big guns too, as these dwarves are more primitive, these are more primal. So if you're expecting a bunch of flame cannons and stuff, that's not going to happen here. And yeah, this kind of fits with the lore, as the Norse dwarfs themselves never really embrace technology as much as the rest of the Kara's Anchor. Now, since you're losing a bunch of the higher tier units that the dwarves normally get, you do get your own roster, which we'll talk about a little bit later on this video. So you balance it out and you get some really different changes if you want to just have a different experience with the dwarfs as a whole. A really important building, which only really becomes accessible to you as you start reclaiming Norska, are the reclamation works. And as you can see here, they've got massive bonuses. These are only available to you through cities that have this kind of blue icon, which is very similar to the landmark building. You will have access to landmarks too, and some of them are quite special, but these reclamation works are going to be the main way that you're going to be able to settle in Norska and actually build it up. It's a low tier building, and that means that you're going to be able to build it up as soon as you take over the settlements, and yeah, the benefits are just absolutely massive. Keep in mind that this is still a very aggressive campaign, so maybe you might not want to build that. It really depends, at least until you've solidified yourself a little bit more, as enemies are going to be declaring war on you really quickly. This is going to be a campaign where you're going to be dealing with enemies pretty much surrounding you most of the time, and they're going to have quite a high aversion to you, so you're going to expect a lot of war. And as you can see, as we fly over Norska, you can see the blue icons, so those are the ones which you can build those special buildings. It's pretty much the whole country, and it really does help you out, especially when you want to start expanding. They're very beneficial to you. Like, trust me, I've been playing for a few hours, I've done 2 campaigns just to test it out. You're gonna need them. Well, unless you want to make things more difficult for you, which, some players kind of want to do. Anyways, let's talk about the tech tree. So this is quite stylized, and it's very interesting, as obviously, the normal dwarfs have a massive tech tree. This is much smaller, but it focuses more on building up your forces. It's very compact. You should be able to get it done relatively quickly, especially if you start boosting up your research rate. But yeah, it's a lot to focus around taking away corruption in the area, building up the abilities of your warriors, hell, even boosting up some Norse warriors as you do get access to some new ones. In general, the faction tech tree is pretty good. It's definitely something that you need to take a look at properly as you start building up, as you need to plan ahead and see which is the most beneficial for you. It's not like where the dwarfs are, where you just kind of focus at the beginning on your economy and then go from there. As here, everything's kind of spread out. There's also that thing at the end, keep in mind for that, where you will be fighting against the Kara's Anchor, as you will lose a lot of diplomatic relations with them, but you'll be having a lot more with Kislev. So it might be beneficial to you to keep Kislev alive. It depends on your playstyle, really, but it can help to have a little bit of an ally, especially if VIKRAM and the others do survive. Right now, they don't, because, well, you know how it is. There is a secondary line here too, which are just by themselves, so you don't need any prerequisites for them, barring some cash, obviously. And yeah, these will focus around your economy. Some of these are really, really good. So upkeep minus 20% for infantry units. I mean, who doesn't want that? And yeah, you're going to want to go around these. The thing is that you might not notice, I didn't at the very beginning, so make sure to scroll. Now, you're going to want a new Lord option too to work with your Norse Dwarfs. The Standard Lord and the Rune Lord are fine, but here is the Ward Lord, which is pretty cool. I actually quite like these. So, they'll work on Rune Magic too, but it's not as heavy as the Rune Lord. The idea is this is kind of like, the way I'm seeing it at least, is it's kind of like a mixture of the capabilities of the Rune Lord and the Standard Lord to give you something quite strong. Their stats are pretty good overall, and they're able to be at the front line without really too much of an issue at all. They can just smash their way without suffering a lot. It gives you another option if you want something more themed to have, you know, more of a Norse Dwarf thing rather than just going for a basic Rune Lord or a Standard Lord. I think it works out quite well, and obviously their skills will focus, even the red lines and all that, will focus on your big boys. The Legendary Lord himself is very, very strong. I like him, especially when he's mounted. You can see the mount later on in this video. And yeah, honestly, no complaints. I think he's a perfect frontline Lord to deal with just chaos, chaos, and more chaos, which is going to be very, very common, considering that everyone's going to be declaring war on you very, very quickly. Well, evil factions. Now, he is also supported by technically a legendary hero, and I say technically because he's a bit different. You actually recruit him as a normal unit once you do the tech, so he doesn't level up, and he's already got all the abilities at the very beginning. You can tell that his stats are absolutely insane because he's very, very strong, so he kind of acts as a legendary hero without having to level him up. He is very, very, very strong. His runes abilities are really good too, and he's really good to have alongside supporting your Legendary Lord. At least that's how I've been kind of having him. Plus, I mean, just look at those stats. Those are just freaking glorious. And if we move on to the Ward Lord, I mean, it's another Lord option, and I think it works out kind of well. I love the look of it. I like the theming, and it just kind of adds to a little bit extra. I do wish that more races and factions in vanilla had access to more Lord options and hero options too. So you never know in the future, but until then, you know, it's always nice to have something a little bit different, isn't it? The Huskars are a really cool unit, so they've got magical attacks, they're able to do a lot of damage, they're very heavily armored. It's definitely something that you want for your front line, and yes, I'm pretty sure that you guys can notice the lighting issue, but that's more of a vanilla thing at the moment until stuff gets patched out. Yeah, I mean, it's not that bad. You won't notice it too much from too far off. Stormbeards are just freaking awesome because not only are they a shielded, very heavily armored unit that can do quite a decent amount of damage, but they've also got access to Vanguard and they've got access to Ogre Charge too, meaning that this is your big hitter. If you want them to hit from the side, or if you want them to just like surround, hell, they can be your front line too. It just depends. If you want to get into the enemy up close, some of you old tabletop fans might remember that old build where you had a frontline dwarf army. And they're supported really well by the Ward Bearers, which have a massive amount of spell resistance, like 75% or something. I mean, everything that you're getting here is going to be quite strong because your roster is going to be quite small, and it kind of makes sense. It's balanced very well as far as I've seen. I don't think it's anything that's too strong, because if you're missing out on all the big cannons and all that type of stuff, you're going to be weaker anyway. Right, so we've got Orgy's Blades, and these are pretty much a limited unit. However, they're armored, Vanguard deployment, they've got Frenzy, they've got Regeneration. These are a damage dealing unit. These guys are able to cut down swaths of hordes, loads and loads of Norskins if you're dealing with them, which you will be dealing with them. And yeah, I really like them. If you mix them up with the pseudo-legendary hero, as I like to call him, and then have him on a big army, like, you're going to be doing quite a lot of damage up front. So you got Braves too, which are pretty cool. So they're anti-infantry, they're damage dealers too. They're pretty good at being up front. They don't have a lot of armor, so they will take damage quite a bit, but they do have decent physical resistance. I mean, it really much depends on how you use them. I've used these guys more as the flanker, as, yeah, they can do a decent amount of damage. I mean, it's still not the best flanker because they're still dwarfs, but I mean, that's what you have to work with when you're working with stubby legs, I guess. Something pretty interesting here is, of course, the Marauders, the Norskins that you will get. They're not really Marauders, but they kind of are. And the Bondsmen themselves are pretty strong. You know, it gives you an anti-large unit, it gives you a shielded unit, charge defense versus all. Something that really you don't have access to normally, so it kind of helps to just have a little bit of extra push. There's a few different types, and this is the most original one. Obviously, then there's a different version, which, interestingly enough, gives you another one, which is kind of like a normal Marauder, and then a mounted variant, which kind of works out kind of well, because this means that you have something that's incredibly fast. Yes, they're basically Marauder horsemen, so don't expect fantastic stats. The leadership is quite good, but it's more for the speed. If you want to have something to harass with, it's also a range unit too. So you can actually use a few different tactics with this faction than you wouldn't be able to with the normal dwarves. And I think that works out kind of well, as it gives you some extra stuff to play around with, which is always really good. Spike gunners are actually quite fun too, so they're armored, so yeah, not bad. Armor-piercing missiles, you know, decent melee combatants, so you can actually have them up front. And they've got Vanguard. They've not got a lot of range, but they are able to do a lot of damage to enemy armor. The idea is to have something short range, so you're still getting your armor-piercing attacks. You're not really just taking the benefit of the Thunderers, because you don't have access to Thunderers, but the idea is to give you something at the very least, because you will be dealing with a lot of armor. You know, that's why there's so many different units here, which just kind of add into a little bit of extra push, because you're dealing with loads of Warriors of Chaos. So this kind of adds in with the Path Grinders too, as they've got a little bit of range again. I'd call them very similar to that of maybe Miners, I think, is the best example, but with Sword and Board instead of a great weapon, and they work out quite well at the end of the day. The thing is that you need stuff to be able to do damage against shields, you need stuff to do damage against, well, pretty much hordes and hordes of Chaos Warriors that you're going to be dealing with constantly. Troll Bearers are another high tier unit, which are pretty freaking strong, so not only are they armored and anti-large, but they've also got access to magic attacks, poison attacks, and flame attacks. So you're going to be able to do quite a lot to, well, pretty much anything that gets thrown at you, and I really like these units. It just depends on how you use them, but in general, I mean, look, they're gonna stomp on any big monster that you need to deal with, and you're going to be dealing with a lot of big monsters. Frost Drakes will come into play, which, yeah, they're pretty much just, you know, like the Iron Drakes and stuff, you know, the flame guns. So it's just the same thing. It's the only thing different is that you're not using a flame attack, you're actually using frost attacks. But if you're already used to using the flame attack weapon in the normal dwarf roster, you're pretty much good to go here. The last thing is the Rune Draken, which is quite cool. So this is a new type of artillery piece, I guess. That's the best way to say it, but it's also multi-purpose, as you've got loads of different units on it already who can do their own type of firing. So this is your big range unit, I guess. It's also decently viable in melee combat, as, you know, it's anti-infantry, it's aquatic too, which I think is quite interesting, but then again, you know, it is a ship. But it causes terror, so you want it up close too if you want to kill off enemy leadership, and it can hold out quite well. I think it's visually stunning, it's really freaking cool, and it's one of those things that you can just have a little bit of fun with. You can try and doomstack them, but I don't know how viable that would be, though it could be quite fun. The roster itself might seem small, but it's really not, considering that you've got access to all the other dwarfs. So you've got the basic heroes, you've got the basic lords, you've got some basic units here and there. You still have grudge throwers, you still have ballistas. Mind you, I don't think anyone really uses the bolt thrower unit. And also you have your own unique regiments of renown, which I'm leaving for you to discover, as that's usually the best way to go. So yeah, I mean, this is a great mod. It's exactly what we expected from Game 1 and Game 2, just a bit more improved for Game 3, and well, the quality's always there. You know, Cataph is a fantastic modder, and I want to talk about the campaign now once we do a little bit of a randomly generated army for myself and a randomly generated army for Norska, as that's usually the common stuff that you'll be fighting. It's very fun. It's very hectic. You're going to be dealing with a lot of warfare. This is nowhere near going to be an easy campaign because early on you're going to be fighting against Frog. He's going to basically be attacking you within a few turns if you don't take the first settlement. So yeah, that's going to be there. Then you've got, obviously, the Skaven of Clan Mulder, Azazel, Wolfric. You've got Malice, who's very hyper-aggressive lately, so he will be declaring war on you. You've got some allies, which is obviously Kislev, but unless you're really actively helping them out, and usually if Clan Mulder do declare war on you, then they won't die out so quickly. But Kislev does die out, keep that in mind. So yeah, one thing that can always be said very positively about this mod is the fact that this mod makes it so your campaign is very drastically different from all the other Dwarf campaigns. So that means that you're going to be able to have a lot more fun with it, and you're going to be able to experience something which is fan-made but based on very old lore. I mean, was it 3rd edition that the Norse Dwarfs existed until 4th, and then they just kind of died out, more or less? Like, they still exist in lore, but they just weren't represented enough. And I do have a feeling that we will see the Norse Dwarfs eventually represented in-game, as it's very likely that we will see them for Warhammer the Old World, so it just kind of makes sense. But until then, you know, these mods are always something to bring a lot more life into the game, especially if you've been playing a lot of factions. You want to have something different, you want a new experience. It's definitely there, and it feels good. It feels really good. I think I played for around 6 hours or so, just in my own time. You're gonna love being sick to the point that you can't actually sleep, so it allows you to get these stuff sorted relatively quickly. And yeah, it was really, really fun. It's definitely, like I said, hectic, but it feels great considering that we've been dealing with a lot of passive AI lately. Now, since the AI is stronger, you're being thrown right into the thick of it, which makes sense for the Norse Dwarfs. You're surrounded by potential enemies. With all that being said, the mod is fantastic. Like, I can't say anything bad about it. It's definitely something really, really special. You'll be able to find it in the link in the description below, so if you want to just play something now, there you go. Honestly, I highly recommend it. But let me know what you guys think about this faction in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion. I'm going to let the rest of the battle play out. I could talk more, but unfortunately, I'm just not feeling 100%. This has been something that has been kind of plaguing me for about 3 weeks. So I believe a little bit of rest is needed now today. So until then, I'll see you all very, very soon. Have a good day.
Down! Right far, right fast! Attack! Longbeards! We demand blood! The clans unite! Nothing can stop us! Warriors! To the Karazanko! And Minus! Pump those dwarven legs! Good! Attack! For Grimnir, I order thee! Yeah! How far undim? Have at them! Ranged firepower ready! Charge! Yes, Lord! Warriors! Dwarf warriors! Blow through! Anat! It's an honor! War of vengeance! We have scores to settle! Scarf! Scarf! Dowie! Attack! Warrelish! It's a reckoning! Longbeards! Dwarf warriors! Dwarves! Ready axes! Victory will be ours! For the ancestor gods! We will have Go through!